Welcome to the Evidence-Based Marketer and part 4 of our 5-part series on marketing and the 5 senses. Today we're going to cover hearing. And this is a podcast, so it's super appropriate. I'm William Chettle, Director of Experience and Engagement here at Symmetry Partners.
I'm Andrea Loyne, Digital Marketing Specialist here.
Thanks for listening. So,
and that's all we had to say on sound.
Start a podcast. That's our advice.
Especially if you have a great voice or you have a great jingle, start a podcast.
Mm-hmm. So, as always, we're going to start with the science of the sense. And hearing is actually involved in more than sound. It also it detects the direction of gravity and changes in movement. When you get seasick, that's actually the result of your ears, it's a combination of ears and eyes. Basically, you're getting a conflicting messages. Your eyes are seeing one thing, your ears are experiencing another, and that's why we get seasick. But to hear a sound, your ears have to do 3 things in very quick succession. They have to direct the sound waves from the outer ear towards the inner ear. They detect fluctuations in air pressure and translate these fluctuations into electrical signals that your brain can then comprehend. The mechanics, it's a bit like a relay race with a variety of bones and fluids passing along data from the sound wave until it gets to the auditory nerve, which then sends information to the brain, and then, we hear something, we interpret it. Unlike many of the other senses, no chemicals are really involved in the process. It's all mechanical. That's hearing in a nutshell. But I think when you think about sound, again, this is something that many offices and environments make a big mistake on. It's something you can control with basically 100% precision. But we've all gone into restaurants where the food is amazing and you cannot hear what the person next to you is saying.
Or it doesn't match, if you're in a nice, relaxing environment, you're eating food that is high end, and all of a sudden you have, hardcore music playing extremely loud. Doesn't match.
And you can control this. And it amazes me sometimes when you wander into businesses and they've got the radio playing. And I realize that you have to pay a little bit more, or you should pay a little bit more to actually be able to control the music. Mm-hmm. But why not actually have the right music for your brand? Especially a lot of retailers, this is something they focus on very, very relentlessly, because the sound of that space is critical to the kind of people they want to attract, and in some cases not attract. Right? If you don't want middle-aged people like myself going into a clothing store,
you can do that with music.
Blast loud music.
Well, they're trying to set an audio brand, right? They want mm-hmm. people to come in, and it goes back to a principle we've talked about numerous times on numerous ones of our podcasts, is knowing who your target audience is. Knowing who you're targeting and that ideal persona is going to be important with what sound you choose, because you're going to deflect people if you choose the wrong sign or sound that could possibly be huge customers for you.
So we're in financial services, and I've gone into a lot of offices of financial advisors, and these are financial advisors who tell people not to listen to the noise on TV, not to focus in on whatever CNBC is blaring about. And you go into their office, and the first thing at reception is CNBC, and it's often too loud, and they're blaring nonsense that is just designed to attract viewers. So it's a complete disjunctive message. I've gone into offices where the receptionist is wearing headphones.
Doesn't help.
and again, offices where they're playing music that's not appropriate, or frankly, in most professional offices, there probably generally shouldn't be music for the most part.
No, and if it is, it should be, calming. It should be classical. It shouldn't be any sort of genre that's going to have a possibility of offensive language or offensive remarks. It's only going to be a turnoff if it's there.
And again, this can all be controlled. You can choose the music. You can choose how loud or not loud your office is, your space is. And it's really important to be thoughtful about this, because so many places, unfortunately, especially restaurants, aren't. There are restaurants that I love to eat at, but I will never take people to.
Right.
Because I just can't have a conversation.
Right. And it's funny because Starbucks is really good at this. They set their playlist for the quarter, and they will send that same playlist to every one of their stores. And that the stores all have a cohesive audio brand that when you're in one Starbucks and you go to the next Starbucks, you feel the same way and you have the same experience. They're really good about that, and they plan. It's intent. They're using an account that they can pick and choose the music, so they're spending a little money on their sound, but it makes it all feel the same. You're going to walk into one Starbucks and feel one way and feel the same way walking into the next.
In the old days, they used to sell CDs of the
They
music
did.
they played in their stores.
They did.
And there is some studies on the calming impact of music. This is why elevator music is a thing, because there are people who are nervous in elevators. And you've noticed on a lot of planes, they actually play music often before you take off and after you land, because they know that this is a fraught time for some people, and they're just trying to provide an extra level of calmness for you. But think about other things, like how is your phone answered?
Mm-hmm.
I have called people and had a great experience on the phone, and I've called people and had a terrible experience on the phone, including one time I called somebody and the receptionist answered and said, I think he's in the bathroom. Hey, are you still in the bathroom? Oh, yeah, he's still in the bathroom. He'll be there in a minute. Can you hold on?
Sound you don't want to hear.
Yeah, but this was something that with a little training and even scripting could have been avoided. If you have an out of office message or hold music, what are those like?
Yeah.
I've been on hold music, which I'd rather actually keep being on hold because it was so pleasant. And somewhere I just wanted to hang up because it was just so awful.
Well, yeah, and if you're playing a message to them, make sure that it's terrible, but you find someone who has a calming voice. If the voice on the other end of that phone before they're even talking to someone in your office upsets them, you're going to start that whole conversation off wrong.
And of course, this gets into the whole and very fraught issue of accents. And I know someone who once actually hired a person to be their receptionist because that person had a British accent. And they were, because in America, we tend to perceive British accents as being more sophisticated, classier. Mm-hmm. Whether that's right or wrong, it's certainly in England, they don't perceive it that way. But
I know someone who hired someone to get rid of a Southern accent because it was perceived to be not intellectual. And so you can go both ways on that.
Yeah. And of course, in certain regions, having an accent that is not part of the region is going to stand out. And again, you want to be thoughtful about this. And if you notice on TV and even on radio, basically it's all the same accent in America, and it's essentially it's been sort of pinned down to somewhere in the Midwest, maybe Indiana. It's like the Indiana accent. Yep. And this is sort of the American quote unquote standard, although there are many regional accents in this country, and if you travel around, you'll certainly see them, and certainly different words that we use for different things. The whole sub, hero, grinder, hoagie dilemma.
Package store up here in New England, a package store is the liquor store, and it doesn't make sense.
In DC, we just call it a liquor store.
Yeah.
But
Yep. It's the ABC store from where I'm from. So everything has a different name. And you're right with the accents. It makes a difference. And if you're being conscious of accent and tone and all of these things in the people that are the first interaction with your firm, it's going to go a long way.
Mm-hmm. And also, how do you even train people to deal with conflicts? Again, this is not going to be every business, but certainly you don't want to generally be shouting at people when they're complaining about something. A smooth and an understanding and warm voice is going to be much more helpful. Mm-hmm. Side note: great way to deal with conflicts and to calm people down when they're angry at you or angry about some service that they received or didn't receive. Ask them to very specifically detail what happened. Because as they start talking about the specifics and get very specific and ask questions about the specifics, it's harder for them to stay mad because now they're just so focused on getting you all the details.
That's true. And there's other ways that sound can be implemented, things I didn't even think of. But Hershey's Kisses, Hershey's in general, has honed in on the wrappers on their candies, on their kisses in particular, they always are in, really rich colored tinfoil. And tinfoil's loud, makes a lot of noise, and so they've done this on purpose. It's very tactile, it's visual, and now an audio experience of unwrapping that foil, and it makes it feel like it's a luxurious experience. And so this little tiny milk chocolate has now become a whole experience through unwrapping foil and hearing it. And Coca-Cola has their iconic and then the pour over ice. It's stuff you don't even think about, but if you heard that, you'd think of Coca-Cola. And so they've used these different ways to make it feel, they've made their audio brand, right? Because you hear that crack of the can or the crumple of the tinfoil, and all of a sudden you're back in that experience.
Yeah, and this all goes back to Russian scientist Pavlov and Pavlov's famous dogs. And for those that are not familiar with the experiment, what he did is before feeding dogs, he would ring a bell. And so they associated the sound of the bell with being fed. Mm-hmm. And what he found is that he no longer even had to feed them. If he just rang the bell, they would start salivating. They were anticipating the meal. So like Hershey's Kisses, like Coca-Cola, they've come up with a sound that is triggering you to have very positive associations with the reward that is about to come.
It's true. Yep. It's funny because I do that with not just my animals. My kids are the same way, though. If we like music in our house, so in the morning we play jazz, and we're realizing that when jazz is on, our kids want to sit at the bar and they're looking for food, and we're like, oh, look at that. We've now trained them that jazz is our morning music, and that's when we sit and we have breakfast, and they look for it, whether it's noon or 2:00 in the afternoon. They're sitting there, expecting to get fed.
And even like computer companies like Microsoft spent a long time creating that sound of when you turn your computer on and when you turn your computer off. They thought about that for a very, very long time and tried a lot of different things. Obviously like train stations or trains when the doors open and close. This is all being thought about. Elevators. Again, most of us are probably not in the elevator or software development business, but it's worth thinking about. If there are sounds and repeatable sounds in your business, can you be deliberate about them? Can you make them work for you? Can you make them pleasant? Can you trigger positive associations, whether it's jazz and breakfast or ringing a bell and being fed? These are things that you have the potential to control and incorporate into your brand and your messaging.
Well, yeah, Microsoft Intel has that bong, the 5 tones. The Harvard Business Review found that it's played somewhere in the world once every 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. So that has helped it become one of the most well-known sounds across the world because somewhere it's being played and it's 5 tones.
Yeah, and NBC of course has its little chimes. Dun, dun, dun. Again, very famous, and they've really incorporated relentlessly into their brand. Mm-hmm. And so you wouldn't think that necessarily a TV station would have such an important sound signature for them, but they do. And this is just one more opportunity to think about incorporating something that a lot of us just frankly don't.
Mm-hmm. And it's going to stick in your head. Jingles are a huge part of marketing for products. And I'm sure everybody has that one jingle. The State Farm one tends to come to most people's mind that's going to stick with them. And if they hear something that sounds like it, or it's going to bring it to mind.
It's called an earworm.
It's gonna make you think just for a second.
Yeah, and it's interesting with these ads. You remember the jingle much more than you remember the specifics of whatever the ad was. Mm-hmm. And that's partly because auditory memory is very for a lot of people it's easier to remember things you've heard necessarily than things that you've seen. And,
that's true.
And so this is why often people, if they're trying to learn something, have to listen to it again and again, because that's the best way. Like learning a language, it's a lot of it's about listening versus reading the words.
That's true. I language aside, I am a visual learner, so I have to read on the page. My husband listens to books constantly, and that's how he learns. And I just can't focus when I'm listening to a book. I have to visually see it, but he can hear a book read to him all day long and take in everything.
So I think we've covered a fair amount of ground here on sound and hearing. And join us next time when we wrap up our series on sight. Until then, if you'd like to listen to other episodes in the series or additional episodes of The Evidence-Based Marketer, please go to theevidencebasedmarketer.com. Until then, this is William Chettle, Evidence-Based Marketer. See you soon.
Thank you.
Symmetry Partners, LLC is an investment advisory firm registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. The firm only transacts business in states where it is properly registered, excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Registration of an investment advisor does not imply any specific level of skill or training and does not constitute an endorsement of the firm by the Commission. No one should assume that future performance of any specific investment strategy, product, or non-investment related content made reference to directly or indirectly in this material will be profitable. As with any investment strategy, there is the possibility of profitability as well as loss. Due to various factors, including changing market conditions and/or applicable laws, the content may not be reflective of current opinions or positions. Please note the material is provided for educational and background use only. Moreover, you should not assume that any discussion or information contained in this material serves as the receipt of or as a substitute for personalized investment advice. Please note that nothing either stated or implied on this podcast is intended to be compliance or legal advice regarding your marketing program.